Hi, I'm Troy Walseth with Walseth Teams with Keller Williams in
What's up, guys? Don Hill here, Tampa Bay Real Producers. We are at The Vault in downtown Tampa for our second annual Agent's Choice Award. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Tampa Bay Real Producers podcast. This, of course, is the podcast that is made for real producers, by real producers, and with none other than Tampa Bay's real producers, such as our guest here today, Mr. Michael Wyckoff. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing real good, my friend. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here, man. It's been a little while since we've seen each other. I know you might recognize Michael if you follow our platform. We've featured him in the past. I don't even remember what issue it was, but a couple of years back, you were featured as a broker. I think we've actually had you in a Making a Difference section as well.
We did, yeah.
If I remember correctly. So there's been some articles out about Michael over the years. There's a lot to talk about with this gentleman because he's involved with a lot of different things. So we might have to have him back for another episode just to cover everything that we have to talk about, but we'll do our best to flush some stuff out. Michael is the past president of Pinellas Realtor Association. That was organization, I should say. That was in 2023. He's still on the board of directors for them, as we were just saying, off camera this year, and that's been a hectic travel schedule, to say the least.
Indeed.
For him, and he's involved with, he knows a lot about the NAR settlement, which I know has been a kind of a big topic for a lot of agents lately, so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But let's just start a little bit with people who might not know you that well, Michael. Briefly, background. How'd you get yourself into this market? If you moved here from somewhere else or you grew up here, and how'd you get into real estate?
Yeah, so originally from New Jersey, so northeastern guy, but I was on the early release program from New Jersey and got to Florida when I was 13 years old.
Okay.
So I've been a beach kid ever since.
Nice.
Not a kid anymore, obviously.
There's beaches in Jersey, too.
Was a beach kid. Yeah, it's totally different. It's the shore.
The shore is different,
there.
yes.
Yeah, totally different. So anyway, moved to Indian Shores at the age of 13, and within about 6 months thereafter moved to Madeira Beach, and I've actually lived in Madeira Beach ever since.
Okay.
Other than when I left to go to college, went to Florida State.
And one of your offices is right there, Madeira Beach.
Yeah, so my office
Engel Völkers.
It is. It's right on Gulf Boulevard in Madeira Beach. Been there. It was my office when I was an independent broker since 1997. So I got into the real estate game right after college. I literally graduated college on a Friday. On Monday, I was back here in St. Pete taking real estate classes.
Oh, wow.
The following Wednesday, took the state exam, which when you actually had to take it with a pencil and paper, on filling in the little bubbles,
It's like the SATs.
had to drive to Orlando to go take a test. It was only given every 2 weeks. Whole different experience, right? So, but anyway, within 3 weeks of graduating college, I got my real estate license. Part of the impetus behind that was I graduated college during a recession, and I was a marketing guy. My degree is in marketing, so no one was hiring marketing or advertising people at the time, and got offered the opportunity to get a job, what I thought was a job, with a paycheck at a real estate company, and then realized doesn't really work that way, right?
You were hired as an agent.
I was hired
with
as
no
an agent
paycheck.
with no paycheck, not really understanding what I was getting myself into at 22 years of age.
Right.
And
but it was a job.
Yeah, it
somewhat.
was what I thought was a job, and thankfully, I had tremendous support from my parents at the time. They allowed me to move back in and mitigate expenses, and gave me a chance to get production ramped up. So. Started with the major franchise. I was with the Century 21 back in the day in Seminole.
What year was that you got licensed?
1991.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm an old timer, man. We didn't have internet.
You've seen the markets come and go, baby.
Yeah, buddy, it was crazy. We had, you guys that love Zillow and all that, there wasn't none of that, right? And we didn't even have computer.
You were calling the pink sheets, man.
Right? We didn't even have computer-based MLS. Our MLS came out in books. Every 2 weeks, we'd get a book. And it was crazy, right? Offices set up were totally different.
Yeah.
You didn't email anybody. You didn't text anybody. We had a beeper, right? Drove around with a roll of quarters in my car so I could make phone calls if my beeper went off. Yeah, it was totally different world. But it's kind of a blessing for me because it showed me how it's different, right? And I cut my teeth in that much more intense type of interaction.
Did you ever think you'd be in the business over 30 years?
I didn't. I really didn't. I didn't know that there was going to be any kind of a springboard into anything else. But I got into became a real estate instructor a few years after I got my license as well, because I find myself really getting into the law and the legal end of things.
Yeah.
And I like to take a deep dive into whatever I'm doing.
Right.
So I went and got my instructor's license, and the old adage at the time, I was floundering a little bit with production-wise, so those who can do, those who can't teach, right?
Yeah.
So I was the teach part of that equation for a little while. And then realized, this is a lot of work for not a tremendous amount of compensation. But it put me in front of some of the right people, and some opportunities presented themselves. And then I was able to go out on my own and do my own thing.
Yeah.
And open my own brokerage.
So how long was it after you got licensed that you opened your own brokerage?
So technically, I did that in about 1993, 94.
Okay, so it wasn't that long.
And I worked more in a consultative capacity. I was working with some CPAs and accountants, helping them value portfolios for tax purposes.
Yeah.
So I became more consultative, and then I took on some management roles, property management, renters, things like that. So it was, I kind of did a lot of little things and just not a lot of production-based things. And then as my sphere of influence grew, I started using my marketing skills and marketing my sales services to people. And then through, coincidentally, one of the classes I was teaching, I met my much better half, Sherry. And we...
she finally straightened you out, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of what it took, right? Yeah, so she was getting her real estate license. I was already a broker. She wanted to open a brokerage. So we did that together.
Gotcha.
In 1997.
Okay.
So that's when we really went for it as a brokerage. We opened an independent company in Madeira Beach called Sun International Realty at the time.
Yeah, I think when we initially met too, in fact, when we featured you for the first time, I think it was when you still had an independent brokerage.
Not sure. No.
Or was it under Engel's at that point?
I was Engel Völkers at the time, because we joined Engel Völkers about 8 years ago.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
So we were independent at the time with one office on the beach. We were doing a lot of things on a smaller scale. started growing and expanded a little bit, changed our name to Vicinity Realty Services, had our office on the beach, bought the building we were still in, and we had opened a second office in Tampa on Beta Bay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, in MacDill, near the intersection of Beta Bay.
Being on the beach the way you are with Madeira Beach, have you always had like this market of working with investors that are looking for, I know you work a decent amount with like short-term rentals. We have talked about that. And so I'm assuming you still have a lot of investors that are interested in that type of world and space. Was that something you experienced over these years, or was that more recent?
Yeah, so that was sort of my beginning, was working more with investors through the collaboration that I had with different CPAs and accountants and attorneys that I was helping kind of consult with.
Yeah.
I was doing more fee-based stuff like hourly and consultative things. And then as I got into sales, those people remained in my database. And it was a natural progression for me to get into working with investors.
Sure.
And then through some of the attorneys, did some probate work and things like that. And then as my business kept growing, then it got more into regular the traditional residential sales that we see.
Is most of your business now traditional real estate?
No, I do a pretty good cross section of. It is sales mostly. I do some management as well, a little bit. At one point, when the market was really bad and sales weren't happening during the major crisis, the mortgage crisis, we ended up growing a vacation rental management business and had just about 100 units under management at the time, and that was by necessity, and it got us through that recessionary period where sales were down. We lost most of our salespeople because nothing was selling, and then I got into the short sale business and the Fannie Mae business, the foreclosure sales. So I tried to move with the market when opportunities presented themselves. Sure. As I said, I try to get deep into what we're doing, so I try to spot trends and figure out where's the next opportunity.
I feel like you have to do that if you're going to be in the business over 30 years. Right?
I agree. Yeah,
because
you do.
There's not one cookie cutter way that's going to work that long. You got to have different strategies.
I go from paper books to instant communication through our cell phones. So this is no credit to me, but those of us who've been in the business a long time have had to learn how to morph with the business.
Yeah, and it's a testament though to the fact that I think it's very admirable to, no matter what the business is, to be in it over 30 years, just from a standpoint of knowing what it takes to succeed in that for a longer period of time and being able to pivot successfully. A lot of people try to pivot, but they don't do it very successfully, right? Yeah. So to pivot and actually do it well speaks again to something that you've done has been working well. You're doing some things right, Michael, in order to be able to grow the way that you have. And you mentioned before that some of your best years ever in real estate were just recently, right? Last couple of years with Engel Völkers support.
They have been, yeah. So you had asked me previously offline, when we joined Engel Völkers, what was the impetus behind that, really? So to more fully answer that question, we were cruising along as an independent company, and as a broker, our lifeblood really is recruiting, right? Is getting people to come work for our company and helping them grow and be more successful in their business, and in turn, their success generates our success as a broker.
Sure.
I do walk the line on both sides, as many brokers do, of being a producing broker as well. Yep. Having been in the area for a long time, I have a large sphere of influence, so I certainly don't want to miss out on that, right? On those opportunities. So. And by the same token, I feel like a broker who's in the business and selling is also able to keep their edge sharp because they know what's going on in the business because I'm still doing it. Anyway, to more fully answer your question, we were working along doing our thing and not really seeing any stair-step growth. It was pretty flat. And we were doing okay. Not major success by anybody's standards, but just sort of maintaining.
Sure.
And we
healthy business.
Yeah, but as I wanted to focus more on the luxury end of the market and investors, beachfront condos, investment condos, waterfront homes, more luxe properties, country club things. As it appeared my natural market was going that way, but I was having a very difficult time competing as an independent because of all of the tools that at that time were not available to smaller companies, and they needed a brand behind them. And we were approached by Engel Völkers, rebuffed them a few times. I was a staunch independent guy, right? I was one of those that we used to call them in college GDIs, right? So then I took that deep dive into what the company was about and the culture. And the interesting thing I found is when they talked to us initially, it wasn't about money. It wasn't about how much you're going to make. We had 2 or 3 meetings where none of that even came up. It was all about the corporate culture and whether there was going to be a fit. And there was no use discussing anything else unless that fit first. And that sort of struck a chord with me. And I thought maybe this is worth a little deeper dive. And so we started exploring. And over 6 to 9 months, we realized it's probably the way to go. And it was like somebody flipped a switch, man. My production went crazy.
What would you say was the one biggest factor that helped impact the production increase?
So I think for me, we were spending a lot of time trying to find the new shiny thing. And this was in a very dynamic time 8 or 10 years ago when technology it's still rapidly evolving, but really it seemed to be exponentially more then. And promotional things and the ways SEO worked and the way the internet marketing was going and ad retargeting and promotional materials. So we were always trying to find a way to look like the big guys. And then when we found Engel Völkers' system, we realized they have a whole staff that's doing just that for us. So I could focus on what I do best. That's transacting real estate and serving my customers and clients. So that took that burden off of me, and it released me to go out there and do more business.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
about focusing on what you're good at and really harnessing your strengths. I think that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned earlier that I think 30 million was your best year that you were able to put out there. Last year was not that far from that, the 23, 24 million in last year's volume. So very solid stuff. Again, I think some people who are in the real estate game as long as you've been, some of them really, whether they want to be competitive or they almost like lose the focus on wanting to continue growing, right? And just are okay with status quo. And I don't really get that vibe, from talking with you. There's always seems like there's an energy, there's an excitement, there's something new and exciting that's happening. And with all the different associations and boards that you're a part of, I don't know how you keep it all up. So we'll talk a little bit about that too, because you've been growing this business, but you've also been, I think, in the eyes of many agents, a leader in the real estate community, right? So, of course, being a president of Pro speaks for itself in terms of the leadership that's voted on by peers, correct? To be able to make you a president. So let's talk a little bit about, what is it about like these different leadership roles, whether it's Pro, the board of directors that you are in now, I guess educate people on like, what is your role with this NAR settlement? Like, are you just somebody who has studied it, or being in the role you have, has there been a little bit more behind the scenes involvement of knowing what's been involved with this whole thing? What is it about like these leadership roles that have really resonated with you as to how it's been a good fit for you?
Okay, so to back up, why did I do it?
Yeah.
I've always been a doer, and as I said, I like to take a deep dive into whatever it is I'm doing, and I realized that I never really understood what the Association of Realtors did for me. I just paid my bill, and I got my lockbox key, and I could access the MLS.
I think a lot of agents can relate to that.
And that's all I really cared about.
Yeah.
And part of that was because the production level I was at wasn't extreme by anybody's measure, and I was just sort of cruising along and didn't see what the benefits were. I just felt like, hey, you got to be a member, pay my dues, and I got my MLS, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
And then I started looking a little bit more deeply into what does the association really offer me as a member, and I started uncovering things as I explored that they really do a lot more than I thought, and there are tools there that are available to me, and maybe if now that I've got this experience, so I started on the board of directors 6 years ago, so I'm 25 years in the business at that point.
Yeah.
And I felt like, you know what, it's time for me to give back to the community that's given me a lot. And I felt like the board supported me. Our members are very collegial in general. So I feel like just getting to know more of our members would let me help them, and they can in turn help me.
Sure.
And foster better relationships with our members and just with other realtors and brokers in general. So I wanted to at least feel like I could give something back. And we did one feature on giving back to the community. And that's always been a thing for me. I'm members of other charity boards of directors and charitable organizations. And that's just what I do. It's what I like to do. I like to be involved. And it seems like whenever I get involved with something, I really go head first, and I go right into the deep end.
What was one of the things that opened your eyes a little bit to the value of the of Pro, let's say, of the association organization? What was one of the things that, kind of surprised you as you dove into it and realized that they do more than you think? Because I think that resonates with a lot of agents that don't exactly know the value.
One of the biggest things is really the advocacy that is provided by all three levels of the organization. You have the local, which is Pinellas or Greater Tampa. You have Florida Realtors, and then you have NAR. There are advocacy efforts on all of those levels. And one thing I never really understood or grasped was that we're one of the largest lobbies in the country. We're like the second largest behind the NRA, which whether however you feel about that doesn't matter. But we're a huge lobbying organization, and we're also very large on the state level. So we have a lot of influence, we have a great audience among our politicians, and we actually have to take that with a lot of importance behind it, because when we speak for a lot of people. We have 240,000 members of Florida Realtors. So that's a lot of votes, if nothing else. And there have been a lot of things that have happened that people may not understand. Like during COVID, we were deemed an essential business because of lobbying, so we could stay at work. We've lobbied to have the business taxes, commercial rental taxes starting to be reduced. We've lobbied to keep banks out of the real estate business. A lot of those things are going on. First-time homebuyer things, the Hometown Heroes program in Florida, that's an initiative from Florida Realtors presented to the state legislature. All those things that you may not really understand how it happened.
Or the impact that might have on you, but it really does have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, the more people that can buy houses, the more business we get to do as realtors.
Totally.
So there is that effect, that cause and effect. We're presenting something that's better for the people we serve, and as realtor members, part of our service is to the general public, to property owners. One of our goals is to protect property ownership rights.
For sure.
So we're looking at always in that vein. I'm fortunate enough to be on the public policy committee for the Florida Realtors, which we take all of the motions and all the insight from all the other committees comes to that public policy group, and then we make recommendations to the executive team to institute policies and procedures, whatnot, and to the legal team to present to our lobbyists and to our legislators.
Gotcha.
So it's really an interesting part of the process. There's so much going on behind the scenes that the typical realtor doesn't know.
Of course. It sounds like it. And so you've been a part of the board there for, you said about 8 years? I think
I'm going on 7 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were president in 2023.
That's correct.
How did your responsibilities change as president? What things were thrown on your plate that you either weren't expecting or did expect, but it still was different?
Yeah, so to be honest with you, even going through the board and ascending through the chairs, wasn't 100% sure exactly what to expect. But it's a really cool position, for lack of a better term. I will say that Pinellas Realtor Organization is a very well-run organization. It's been around for a long time. We have an excellent executive staff that does a great job. It runs like a very well-oiled machine. And part of that's due to the size. It needs to run like a substantial corporation.
Yeah.
And it does. So the president becomes more figureheadish and runs the membership side of the board of directors and helps just kind of corral that, and keep all the fish swimming in the same lane.
How many realtor associations are there in Florida?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I should know that. But
Did I put you on the spot with that one?
You sure did. Yeah. Yeah. You didn't prep me with that question. It's a lot, but I could tell you that we are I think the sixth. Pinellas is like the sixth largest.
Okay.
And Greater Tampa is like the fifth largest or third or fourth largest.
Makes sense.
So brings up the question. We are working on a merger.
Yeah, there's definitely been chatter about a merger, a unification. Is that a better word than merger?
Yeah, okay. The M word's not been well received.
Too corporate like?
Yeah, too corporate. And it isn't any type of a takeover, one over the other.
Yeah.
Technically, Greater Tampa is a larger organization by membership numbers. Roughly 16, 17,000 members. Pinellas is 11,000 members roughly. Both are juggernauts in the realtor world as far as associations go. Both in excellent financial position, both own a lot of real estate, where their locations are, and both very, very, very well run.
Come on in, Jay, if you want to say hi.
Hey, welcome.
Jason McIntosh here, my man, with Michael Wyckoff.
Hey, Michael.
Good to see you, brother. Yeah.
It's all good.
Sorry, Jason McIntosh.
That's it. The owner of the office. So anytime he comes in, he's welcome.
That's right. He's let me sit in his chair.
That's
so
right.
I appreciate that. But so it would create the third largest association in the state of Florida and the fifth largest in the country. So it would be some of the reasons behind wanting to bring these two organizations together, and the benefits are, for one thing, it's a much louder voice.
Yeah.
And all this stuff weaves together. You brought up the NAR lawsuit and settlement. This is not in response to that, but it happens to be perfect timing that we're contemplating this unification, because as the realtor community, my colloquialism is we keep getting punched in the face like every other day by something in the media or these lawsuits. We need a louder voice. We need a bigger voice. And while we're very local in the way we operate, I mean, I have my markets that I serve and know well, but I think as an organization, bigger is better. We can be streamlined, and we can respond to externalities that are influencing our businesses right now as a bigger group. And there's a laundry list of benefits. I don't want to bore everyone with it, but there are quite a few. And to the average member that sells a couple houses a year,
right? They might not recognize it.
They may not see anything substantial. You know, the lock boxes are still going to work, and the MLS is still going to fire up. But with our two organizations, we both have super keys. This guarantees you that if we're one organization, you're always going to have that cooperation, because we're going to have one contract. You know, one won't switch to another lockbox provider, for example. And we know there's a lot of cross collateralization between Hillsborough and Pinellas. Yeah. Lots of Tampa agents work the beaches. I have an office in Tampa myself, as well as the one on the beach. I would hate to have a real division there personally.
Does that division exist today, since they're not united?
Not really, because we are under the same lockbox system, and we're members of the same MLS. But if something were to happen in the future and we were still separate organizations, a board of directors may see a carrot dangled in front of them from either side of the bay and decide to change for whatever reason. Right. And then that is going to have a pretty rough impact on the people that practice on both sides of the bay.
Yeah, which is a lot.
You may have to
obviously, even with what we do, Tampa Bay Real Producers is branded that way for a reason, because there's a continuity on both sides of the bridge, right? That's sense.
Where our head's at too. The proposed name of the organization is Tampa Bay Realtor Association.
Yeah, how about that? See, we were just trying to lead the way, man. We were just trying to lead the way.
Because to me, on a very simple level,
do the leaders play nice in the sand together?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of it. It was so when as I've been a realtor for a while, there was always this, Tampa, Pinellas, it's a fabrication. We formed a task force, which I always joke sounds like we're breaking down doors to do something, but we formed this unification task force made up of an equal number of members from each organization, mostly people in some version of leadership capacity, and we worked so well together. I can't tell you, we found that we had so much more in common than we thought.
That's good to hear.
There was this perception that there were so many differences. Yeah. And the differences really were so subtle that they were almost inconsequential. There are some things in the unification that we're addressing to sort of take, some of the bumps out to make it more similar to one or the other. But it was really a cool process that we went through, that everybody, when we got in the room, you could feel that there were some people really against the unification. We didn't cherry pick the members of this task force to all be in favor of it. We wanted some people that had some reservations about it to bring out the tough questions. And we spent, we're going on 18 months of this process almost.
Oh, it's been that long.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in earnest for 12, 13 months with meetings all the time. We hired a consultant, all that, to help us monitor the situation. And
what's your gut tell you? You feel, I don't know if you're allowed to share that or not, but do you feel like it's going to lead to a unification at some point?
Yeah, I really hope so. I really believe it's for the best for our members, if nothing else. I mean, that's, when we sign up to be a leader on the board of directors, we sign an agreement that we represent that organization in a fiduciary capacity. Okay. Putting the organization's best interests above our own. So I believe in that vein, it is a good idea. As far as word on the street, there are a few people that are not happy with the proposal. They don't think it's a good idea. But the majority of the people I've spoken to,
thread or reason as to what would be the biggest reason against it?
So it goes back to that perception of cultural differences. I think there are some people on both sides. There's no one side better or worse than the other. There are some that have a perception, and I will say it's mostly longer term realtors like myself, the people that have been around a long time, that feel like, they operate very differently than we do over here. Right. the essence of that is they really just don't know because they never looked.
Sure.
It's just a perception.
Yep.
Their perception becomes their reality.
Perception is reality.
Right.
Yep.
So once we have a chance to show them that we're really more alike, the only question becomes, why do you want to be bigger?
Yeah.
And there are some people that, anytime change happens, change is bad.
If the unification happens, does that make it the biggest in Florida?
We would be the third largest in the state of Florida and the fifth largest in the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it is a big deal.
It is a big deal. It's a very big deal. But given the environment we find ourselves in, with the lawsuits and everything, I think it's important that we were bigger. I mean,
is that, would you say, the biggest? So for the average agent, you mentioned it earlier, that's out there. You mentioned the lock boxes and not having that would, I think, be a nightmare if that was ever completely separated and everything.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
It would be expensive too. You'd have to pay 2 fees for everything.
Right. That makes sense. So is that what you would resonate to the average agent out there who might be listening? Like, is that probably where the biggest benefit for them would be on unification, is not having to worry about that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think your customer service is going to be enhanced as a member. You're looking for service from the organization. I think you're going to get enhanced educational opportunities. We'll be able to bring in higher level speakers and event providers because we now have a bigger number. We have found ourselves duplicating our efforts all over the Bay. We had an event, a global symposium. Less than 10 days later, Tampa did the same thing.
Okay.
So we could have combined those efforts, created a bigger event.
Yeah.
And the funny part of it was almost the same people were at, about 50% of the people were at both.
Right.
So
that would have made sense
combining
to
that
combine
audience,
some
you
resources.
could make it bigger,
right,
and less expensive on a per head basis.
Totally.
So there is some economy of scale there. That's not the only reason you unify an organization.
Right.
In this case, I believe 1 + 1 = more than 2.
Well, you also mentioned earlier, Michael, like with these lawsuits and kind of almost the uncertainty of maybe not knowing where some of these things might go, right, in the future, or even where the shoe's going to drop, where it's going to end, right? So we brought up the NAR settlement. Like, what is your perspective on that whole ordeal, where it's at, where it's going, how that should affect the day-to-day operations for an agent today? We actually did have a conversation about this at our mastermind that we did this past month, and you're actually going to be a part of that group now moving forward. We're excited to have you join this group. But that was one of the topics that came up, and then it was interesting from my perspective hearing them go through and talk through what they perceive to be some of the ways that they're communicating it to their teams, as to how to really view it. But, with your role and the leadership role that you have, like what is the message from the top down and pro to its agents and moving forward? Like what should they know?
Yeah. So most everything is coming from NAR down. We have very little to say about the settlement or anything on a local level or even on a state level. So everything's really being fed from NAR down. I am a member of the board of directors for the National Association. That doesn't give me anything more important, really, to be honest. It's generally run by the executive team and legal counsel. So we are in the know, if you will, about things as they develop. And we do have a chance to vote on certain things, but some of this is so fast, and the way the bylaws of the NAR are written, the executive team generally holds most of the power. Yeah. Which is a good thing. It's got to be nimble. So there's approximately 900 members of the board of directors from NAR. Okay. So
how many members are just in the NAR? Period.
1.5 million.
1.5 million.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a big organization.
Sure.
So the executive team, has responded the best they possibly can to the situation as it unfolded. While we never wanted to see ourselves lose that lawsuit, and everybody can have conjecture on the hows and whys that happened, but once that went down, I believe that they responded the best way they could, getting from that point forward. So where we are with the settlement, it's really a kind of a odd time because the settlement's been proposed. It's been agreed upon by the plaintiffs for a mid-June deadline to implement the terms of the settlement, one of which is, how the commissions are paid, disclosures to buyers, things like that, and how commissions are displayed. They will no longer be permitted to be published in the MLS, or any agglomerator of information cannot publish that. As a broker, I can put the commission offerings on my own website, but the confusion is coming a little bit in that this settlement is offered.
So the listing agent cannot list that broker commission offering, can't not be in the listing
on the MLS.
description. On
that
the MLS.
Field will be pulled from the MLS.
Yep.
nor can you put it in the remarks anywhere. You cannot put the commission payable anywhere that everyone else, that all the members can see it, or the public.
That doesn't mean that as a listing agent you can't have that agreement. Obviously,
Correct.
with your homeowner, it just can't be. It's not listed in the MLS.
Yeah. So you pointed exactly to one of the points of confusion.
Yeah.
If you're a social media guy. If you read social media posts, whether it's Florida Realtors or Tampa Bay Realtors groups. What am I going to do? I work mostly with buyers. Now I can't get paid. That's a fallacy.
Sure.
It's a misunderstanding. It is not illegal at this time for you to get paid,
Right.
And nor will it ever be illegal for you to get paid.
Sure.
The manner in which you get paid may change a little bit, or at least how you find out how you're going to get paid. So the terms of the settlement say we can't publish in the MLS or on Zillow or Realtor.com or Homes.com the payout to the buyer's agent. It doesn't make it illegal to pay a buyer's agent. You can still have the same exact listing agreement that we have now,
Sure.
where there's X fee total, and one portion goes to the listing side, one portion goes to the buyer side. Totally okay under the terms of the settlement. It's just how that information is disseminated changes. So
what was the spirit, do you think, Michael, behind why it can't be on the MLS? They just didn't want to have that be public because it's, for what reason?
This is what's confusing to me, because the basis of the lawsuit, according to the plaintiff's lead attorney, was that there was a lack of transparency in real estate. I don't see how hiding that information now makes it more
even more
transparent.
lack of transparency.
So that tells me this is a money grab by an attorney, but I'll leave that to everybody else to make up their minds. So I don't know how that makes it more transparent.
You would think the exact opposite. It would be more transparent if it's there.
Right. So now a buyer, part of the settlement terms is that a buyer, before showing a home to a buyer's agent, before showing a home to a potential buyer, has to have the buyer sign an agency agreement, buyer broker agreement. And it outlines the terms under which they're going to operate and what their compensation is going to be.
Yeah.
Once they ink that, they cannot receive more than they have outlined in their buyer broker agreement. So if a cooperating broker is offering more, they can't accept more than they've agreed to accept.
Okay.
So the essence of the lawsuit, I guess you would say, is that they felt like the buyer should be able to negotiate the fee because the fee is part of the acquisition cost of the property. So this is the mechanism by which they saw it fit to make that happen. It lets the buyer negotiate with their broker.
Yep.
You come to me in my office, say, I want to look at some houses. And how does it work? And I tell you,
this is what it's going to cost you.
Here's what I do for you. Here's what it's going to cost you. Do you agree to that? Yes. And if it's X percent, I can't get X plus 1.
Right.
Right? No matter what the other side's offering. The difficulty is going to come in the mechanics of how we operate. Now you want to see a house on, XYZ street. I have to contact that listing broker and find out if or how much they're paying on every single house.
Just because that's the fee that we've agreed to, if that person's not paying that fee, that's just coming out of, I'm paying that somehow out of pocket. Yeah.
Right. So the argument that NAR has had all along, and any logical person in the real estate business would have, this is going to have a disparate impact on people that are using down payment programs, the VA loan programs, the FHA programs, and those who are traditionally disadvantaged in the ownership of real estate.
Yeah.
Because now they're going to have to come up with extra money that they normally wouldn't.
And that wouldn't come out of closing? Well, I mean, that would come up. That would be additional down payment money. Yeah.
So if the seller is not offering it, is the buyer's agent going to work for free?
Right.
So and you and I have a contract now that says you're going to pay me X percent.
Right.
And I am not allowed to rule out houses that don't pay me unless you give me that permission in writing on that buyer agreement.
Yeah.
Right. So it's going to be a little bit confusing.
Makes sense.
There's going to be a learning
curve. So now
curve.
the buyer is going to have to put down their whatever amount, say it's 5% down plus whatever they would be owing the buyer's agent in those situations.
Unless they decide to make an offer
Yeah.
that includes a concession from the seller.
Yeah.
That could then be used to pay the buyer's agent.
Right.
The scary part for me, if I'm working with a buyer and I make that offer and the seller says, hey, I like everything about your offer except I won't pay your concession and everything else is agreeable, what do I do as the agent?
Right.
I can't just go, hey, I'm not going to get paid. I got to walk away.
Right.
Now I'm potentially working for free.
Right.
The liability issue comes in there. If you work for free, your E&O insurance doesn't cover you. So there's
definitely some mechanical there.
To
yeah.
work. And by the same token, the people that don't want to or can't afford to pay a buyer's agent directly as a buyer are usually the people that really need our services the most.
Right.
So this whole thing turned around by the attorneys in a way that we're trying to help people get a better deal, but they're not helping the right people get a better deal. And it's frustrating.
But I'm sure they're getting their cut pretty well.
Yeah, about $500 million. I mean,
that's all.
No big deal.
Amazing. I wish we had more time, man, because I feel like we can dive into a lot more of this.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
There is. Like I said, we'll have to have you back on another episode.
Happy to do it.
And a couple rapid fire questions here for people, again, just to get to know you who don't know you that well, Michael. Do you have a favorite book, author, seminar that has made an impact on you personally or professionally?
So from an entertainment standpoint, I'm a Randy Wayne White guy. I love his books. I think they're really cool. From a professional perspective, I don't really have one single favorite because I don't want to get stuck in a lane. I like to read across all different authors, all different types, whether it's working with buyers, whether it's being a better broker, whether it's just being a better human being. So Engel Völkers, for example, has a quarterly book club, so I usually get involved in that, and it helps us. And they give us a few books to choose from. We as a group pick which one we're going to do, and then we take a dive into that. So those are really good. I do like getting into business building, production, but also salesmanship, personality types, all those different things. I don't find
I feel
myself
like that's
in one.
Where we could have dove into a whole other conversation, was just the life of being a broker, right? Yeah. And the recruiting that you mentioned, and what you look for in that world, because there was always value there. And I've had similar conversations to some of the other team builders and brokers that have been on here, but I know I would love to hear your perspective more on just that thought process of what you do when you're looking for the right recruits and how you set up that expectation. So again, we'll have to have you back to dive into that a little bit more, but I really thought it was timely to have you on today to talk obviously about the NAR settlement, because with your leadership and your experience, I'm glad that we were able to get your opinion on that and kind of flush out a little bit of the misconceptions that are out there. And I don't think it's a space where buyer's agents should be freaking out, right? It sounds like there's a game plan.
You have people there to support you. That's the first sales meeting I had at my office after this came out, and I said, before we go anywhere, the sky is not falling. Exactly. We're going to be okay. Right. There may be some differences in the way we operate, but we're going to be fine. And
in some ways, it could even help, a lot of buyers from a standpoint of buyer's agents, I should say, from a standpoint of like refining their skills, right?
Absolutely.
Like learning how to have that conversation with somebody, to have that agreement in place in writing, and have that be practiced more.
We should have been
very
using
similar to a listing appointment,
right? We should have been using the buyer's agency agreement for years and years, and many agents do, but most don't. Yeah. Now it's going to, and most of the hesitation around agents that don't use it was, if I present a buyer the first time I meet them with this contract, they're going to get scared and walk away. Right. Well, that's a valid concern, but now everyone has to do it, so we're all on a level playing field. Right,
it's just the normal way to do business.
They can't blame you for presenting them with a contract like you're forcing them. Hey, the law says I have to do this. Yeah. So I think it's going to help us in general. It'll also solidify the relationship between the buyer's agent and the buyer. Because how many times have you heard somebody say, I was working with this guy for 3 months, or this family for 3 months, and then they went and bought an open house on the Sunday because I didn't answer the call. One
side note on that, just out of curiosity, I thought of a question. For someone who is a buyer who wants to do it on their own, right? Doesn't want to work with a buyer's agent, and they just go and find a listing somewhere. Is that listing agent still able to treat it the same way, where they can represent both sides?
So that's something we're seeking clarification on.
Okay.
And I know Florida Realtors legal team and the NAR legal team are looking into how we should interpret that. The way I see it from experience is that we would present that buyer with a non-representation agreement. Says we don't represent you. And some of that's going to depend on your representation of the seller. Are you a single agent? Are you a transaction broker? Are you a non-agency representative? Yeah. So, there's a couple different lanes we need to look at in the representation. So you probably would not be a transaction broker if there's no compensation being given to you from that buyer. So one of the questions has been, I'm holding an open house. Do I have to stand at the door with a buyer agency agreement? Yeah. There's a bit of a carve out for that allows that to take place because you are holding a public open house.
I gotcha.
So there are going to be some things that we still need to get some more information on.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it hopefully by maybe even when this time becomes official, which would be July, I think you said, right?
Yes, yeah.
There would be some more clarity coming out.
Yeah, Florida Realtors is working on new forms to address some of these things. They'll be out sometime mid-May. Okay. So, there's going to be some changes, but I want to encourage everyone to, watch your emails that come from GTR and from Pro or whatever association you belong to that relate to some of the new policies that you're going to have. You're going to want to get there and really and really read it. Don't just delete the email. You're going to want to.
There will be some training needed.
Yeah, and the associations are, of course, are going to have seminars and discussion groups and webinars and things on how to handle these changes.
And so, Mike, if somebody did want to reach out to you, maybe a member or pro and just wants to have a conversation with you for whatever reason or learn more about the unification or some of the stuff going on, what's the best way for someone to connect with you?
So if you're interested in the unification, you can go to tampabayrealtors.org or tampabayrealtor.org, and there is a frequently asked questions, the proposed bylaws, proposed plan of merger, all that's on there, and the schedule of when the town halls are. I think there's only one left. At Pro, and then the voting will take place in mid-May for the actual vote for the merger. But talk about anything else, if I can help anyone.
Anybody can vote?
Any member.
Any member, yeah.
Any member can vote, and it's going to be done online for convenience, obviously. So we need, regardless of which way you feel about it, make your voice heard. Just get out there and vote. It doesn't matter which way you feel. Obviously, I'm in favor of it. I think in general it's a good thing. But get your opinion out there, because if you don't, then you have nothing to say about it later.
Exactly.
You can't complain one way or another if your voice isn't heard.
Can't complain if you don't vote.
But I'm happy to help in any capacity. Our real producers, anybody watching, I mean, right? Let's get it done.
Get the votes out there, baby.
Let
your voice be heard.
Yeah, and vote for our Tampa Bay real producers.
Sometimes,
right? Yeah, I don't even start there. It's a whole other podcast, right? So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm pretty findable if you can figure out how to spell my last name, which they'll have it on the website here and everything.
We'll get it under our description.
My website's my name, Michael.Wyckoff at EV Real Estate. My website's michaelwyckoff.evrealestate.com. You can find me on the Pro website. My contact information is there as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about it, about the NAR settlement, or about what's going on with the merger with Pro and GTR, or anything else about Realtor Life or just brokerage stuff in general. My goal for getting involved in leadership was just to make our realtor community better. And it sounds like a pie in the sky thing, but that was really my goal, was to do what I can and bring my experience to making it better for our members and for the clients that they serve.
Yeah. Well, I think you've done a great job of that. I know from my experience with other agents and many top producers throughout Tampa Bay, they look up to you, they admire you. Many of them, view you as a great leader. And so I think that reputation has been built accurately from what I can tell from our conversations as well. And I'm excited to hopefully have you back again to be able to dive into some of these other principles that we didn't get a chance to talk about.
I'd love it
today. But we'll put a bow on the episode the way we always do, which is just to end with a challenge from the audience. So today's topic with Michael was, a lot based on his experience with the board of directors with Pro, based on the fact that he was a president. It's not every day you get to bring the president of Pro in here on the show and dive into some of the experiences from that perspective. But like Michael said, he also has a lot of background in just seeing over 30 years the ebbs and flows of the market and in running a team, right? And a brokerage. We were just talking off camera too. He's got a couple of hotels that he has connections with down in Madeira Beach. So if you're somebody who might know a buyer for $1 million, couple $1 million plus properties and hotels, you can talk to Michael about that as well. All right. He's got some opportunities there too.
Yep.
But take action on something. Maybe you're somebody who does need to feel like, you're a little uneasy about this NAR settlement. And you just want to get someone like his opinion on how is this really going to affect me. Maybe you have some questions that we didn't get a chance to even talk about today. I'm sure he'd be open to having a conversation with you. Reach out to him. That might be the action step you need to take. Maybe you need to read one of the books that he recommended, whatever it may be. But take action. Do something today that's going to move you forward personally or professionally, so that the time that you invested in watching this podcast was worth it, whether you were watching us through our live stream or, of course, through any of our many podcast platforms. If you don't already subscribe, click the button so you're notified every time a new episode comes out, which is weekly. And we, of course, will see you on the next episode of Tampa Bay Real Producers, powered by Top Producers Nation. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
Hey there, my name is Trevor Collinson with Casker Creative. We're a branding and marketing company, helping people build their brands through advanced storytelling and better than your average aesthetics. One of the reasons I love Real Producers so much is because it gives me a chance to really get outside my box, not hide behind a computer all day, make meaningful relationships, and really immerse in a sector that I'm looking to spend a lot more time in. Thank you so much, Tampa Bay Real Producers.